Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 8th Annual Leicester Human Rights Arts and Film Festival. The festival runs every year from the 4th of December until the 10th. And the aim of the festival is to draw attention to human rights issues at home and abroad, and also to draw attention to December 10, which is Human Rights Day and is marked around the world. This year, the festival is starting with Poetry and Settled Status for All. Poetry and Settled Status for All, this event that we are gathered for tonight, is a preview of an anthology by the same name, which is going to come out, which will be coming out shortly. The anthology was inspired by how around the world people are asking governments to give settled status or indefinite leave to remain or citizenship to all who need such leave. We've also got Munya from Regularize, who is going to tell us a little bit more about how that campaign, one of the manifestations of that campaign in the UK. And he's probably also going to tell us a little bit of news that's just come in from Ireland, where they've just initiated a similar regularization scheme that was in the news yesterday. So without more from me, I'm going to introduce the poets, and the poets will introduce themselves, say something about their poems, and read the work. So first, we are going to hear from Aryan Ashory, followed by Birgit Friedrich, followed by Barrington Gordon. Aryan, over to you.
Yeah, hello to everyone. My name is Aryan Ashory, and I'm 17 years old. I'm from Afghanistan, and it has been more than 4 years that I left my homeland. And now I'm living in one refugee camp. During the time that I left my country and came to the new country where I started my life from zero, learning a new language and starting my life there, I tried to do some activities beside living in refugee camps. I started to make some films, and my films are documentary and short films that mostly they reflects the problems of refugees at the refugee camps. And I'm writing poem in 4 languages. In my own language, that it's Dari, and in English, and then I write it in Greek language. And nowadays I'm trying to write them in German language as well. These are the 4 languages that I speak, and I'm learning them also. And my poems are most political, and the same is most about refugees, because this is what I am seeing every day in my life. And the life of refugees are always getting to be small and small, just let them to be forget. So what I'm seeing every day, it's really sad for me. So I take my notebook and I'm trying to write them down and read it to the world. Even it's less, but I'm sure it will change. It will bring some positive changes. And now I'm going to read one of my poems that it's going to be shared in this anthology. I will do it in my own language and also in English. خدایا کابلانم را تا به کی آواره هر گوشه دیگران بینم. خدایا کابلیانم را تا به کی آواره هر گوشه دیگران بینم. دیگر تا به کی مادری جگر گوشه اش را از دست بدهد. کجاست آن شیری که این طفل نوزاد باید می نوشید؟ کجاست عصای پدری پیری که پیریش را این گونه و بی سرپناهی می گذراند؟ خدایا این گونه کابلم را از هم پاشیدند، این گونه ما را راهی ملک بیگانگان کردند، که این طرف دنیا مادری از داغ فرزند یک دانش میگیرید و آن طرف دنیا یکی در منزل با شکوهش شوکت و شادمانی را جشن میگیرد. طفلان وطنم نه کودکی داشتند و نه طعمی از کودکی چشیدند، اما صرف روزهای غربت را با ناه و ناله سپری کردند. نگاه هم کوتاه‌تر از این است، نگاه هم کوتاه‌تر از این است که دیدن نوزادان تازه به دنیا را ببینم که حتی چشم باز نکردند ولی آنچنان فرپر گشتند. My God, until when must I see my couple wandering the corners of other countries? Until when must mothers lose themselves wandering in forest and on boats? Where is the milk for this newborn baby to drink? Where is the milk for this newborn baby to drink? Where is the walking stick of the old man? My God, see how they strew my country to the four corners of the world. Like this, the purple is outside. Like this, a mother weeps for her lost darling and children, the children of my land. The children of my land have never tasted the meaning of childhood. This country makes them regret for what they were born. Their eyes have not seen welcome, and this is them. That was.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you. We go to Paget next.
Sorry. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Birgit Friedrich. I'm from Germany, and I'm very happy to be here tonight. My very first big poetry reading, so I was a bit nervous, but yeah, how can I beat Aryan's performance? I don't know. I came to Britain in '91 and I made it my home. I have 3 children here, and when Brexit came along, I felt very let down by this country, and I felt lost a bit, and I didn't know what will happen, and I was worried, and it just didn't feel the same anymore. When I saw the numbers on the screen, I remember, and I went to the shop, my local shop, and I felt like very conscious about my accent, about who I am, and that I'm German. And I wrote my first poem. It's just a very short poem about it. And my second poem, shall I introduce my second poem when I read the second one? So it may be easier. So my first poem is called Divorce. Divorce. Your motherland holds my children, sends me home, and leaves me to drown in the sea between us. That was my first poem, and my second poem is slightly different. topic. My mother was a refugee in Germany. My family, they had to leave what was then Danzig, and it's now Gdansk, towards the end of the Second World War in 1945. And my mother had never told me anything about it, but on a family occasion, and she's now 80, in her 80s, she started talking to me about it, and that the Russian soldiers, when they invaded Gdansk, the fear, and the women were raped. Her mother was grabbed by her breasts, and she remembered only that she couldn't speak German. And obviously, kind of the climate right now, I felt I want to tell this story from my mother, because it's so repeated in history. It repeats itself all the time. And migration is so part of our history all over the world. And I find it really difficult to understand why it is so difficult to open doors for refugees. And we should all kind of be aware of this. And I wrote these poems, I wrote a whole series about it, about my mum's history, kind of because it's very personal, and also because I hope it kind of addresses these questions. So it's called Sterntaler. I do not know your truth. The memories are yours to lose. You do not want me to imagine the moment when soldiers arrived on your street. You are 5 when you smell the burning skies, hear the snow crush under their feet, leaving footprints of the silenced behind them. You find yourself in darkness under a cold sky with stars by corpses, drowned under the ice, cracked by the weight of their home. You carry the image frozen in your mind, heavy as the steps you take. Sorry, my screen went. Sorry, you carry the image frozen in your mind, heavy as the steps you take with your tired feet. The boots are too big for you. Your mother had filled in the gaps with soft socks to smooth your way through the drifting snow. And when you cry, she holds on to your hand, keeps you awake, telling you tales mothers of mothers had told their children, and you to me, about a girl lost in the woods, deep in the night, giving her last piece of clothing to those with the least. And when the girl looks up to the moon, the stars drop down as golden coins. When you look up, steel bullets fall instead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Sorry,
you very
my
much.
screen all of a sudden went. So sorry.
That's the brave new world we are living in. And then next we have Barrington Gordon.
Hello, sorry. Hello, good evening, everybody. Forgive me if I sound a bit hesitant. I've not been well, and I will do my best. A bit about myself. My name, as Ambrose has said, is Barrington Gordon. I've worked over the years. I'm a 60s child, that's to put it in context. I've worked over the years at grassroots level within the community. I've also worked in salaried positions in organisations across schools and colleges, and also had the good fortune, I say, to work within institutions such as prisons. I thank Ambrose for this opportunity, all my fellow poets, poetesses, as well as those who have put their valuable time aside to attend. poem that I'm going to read for you in a while, a little bit about the background. The poem is called Running in the Dark. And as regards the background, I visualize myself as a child. As a child in a situation, as has been the case with my fellow poets have alluded to, you know, children caught up in war-torn states. And I submerge myself in terms of writing the poem. And someone might very well say, well, Barrington, well, you're an adult, you're a 60s child, you know, how can you transition from the age that you are, which in effect I'm also a grandfather, to somebody who is, you know, 7, 8, 5 years old? But my answer to that is this, and I firmly believe, as you said, that we all have a child within inside us. And I have to say, a bit like Birgit said earlier on, as the different government policies have unfolded over the decades, it's a strange thing being able to talk in terms of decades. I remember saying to my daughter, it's really weird now that I can talk to you in terms of decades. So many times I find myself feeling like that child, especially because of my skin color, because we cannot blend in, you know. We are ebony skinned. I'm not ashamed of that in any way, means, shape or form. You've survived a lot, as well as many who are reading here today. So using all those elements and my experience of being in this country, I am born here, a British citizen, but that has by no means shielded me from racism or what I call the isms. So here we go with my poem, my contribution to this wonderful event. As I said, it's called Running in the Dark. Running in the dark. We're running in the dark, we're running in the light. We're running, don't look back. Behind is pain and strife. We're running not to get caught. We're running because we bought a ticket to the promised land. We're running, holding daddy's hand. We're running, no time to stop, to pick up that precious doll I dropped in the dirt, now trodden down by soldiers' boots from beyond our village and our town. Trees burn, loud horns grimly blare. We're running, can't catch my breath. Mom says, stay ahead of death. I'm tired, hungry and cold. Dad says, don't worry, be bold. We're running, and I want to be brave. We're running so as not to be slaves. We're running to be free. We're running, I just want to see the boats upon the horizon, so small, a ticket to die for. We're running, and I don't want to give up, but I'm exhausted, and I just want to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrington. Thank you. And then we go to Nils Köbis.
Hey everyone, I hope you can hear me all right. First of all, I want to thank you, Ambrose, for inviting me to this event. My name is Nils Köbis. I am a research scientist at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development, the Center for Humans and Machines. And I think the name of the institute is quite fitting because today I'm representing an algorithm. So the poem you're about to hear was not written by me, but by a computer algorithm. And it comes from a research project that I did together with a master's student that I supervised. It was inspired by a New York Times article where a novelist was describing that he would use an algorithm to get inspiration for his novels. And at the same time, a big new algorithm for text generation was released. It's called GPT-2. And it's trained on a large corpus of text from the internet, and it can predict the next word. And what's remarkable about this algorithm is that it's very flexible. You can use it for different types of text. It can write a newspaper article, and with a little training, it can also write, for example, a novel or a poem. And I myself, I'm interested in poetry. And so together with that master student, Luca Mossink, we discussed whether actually people could still differentiate or distinguish between human written and AI generated poetry. And we conducted a few experiments where we first compared students who wrote poems to poems generated by AI. And we found out that people could not differentiate these poems from one another, even when they had financial incentives to do so. And then later we tested whether AI generated poetry was actually distinguishable from professional poetry by, like proficient writers such as Maya Angelou or Hermann Hesse. And also there we found that people could not differentiate it anymore, again, even when they had financial incentives to do so. So we wrote this up in a paper, and this paper was published, and I'm happy to share the link. And then a few weeks later, Ambrose reached out and asked if I was interested in contributing. So here I am today, very honored to be part of this group. And I think fittingly, I'm not going to read out the poem myself. I'm going to let a text-to-speech algorithm actually read out the poem to you. So please give me a thumbs up if in just a moment you can hear the poem, okay?
Indefinite leave to remain for all. In the state of nature, at night. Its color, sweet and fair. The brightness of the morning. The glory of the sun, the calm of the birds, the magic of the wind. The endless.
That was my poem, and thanks again. I'm really, really appreciating to be part of this, and I look forward to hearing all of your poems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nils. And then it's actually interesting because we're going to hear from Zsófia next. And Zsófia will also tell us about how the digital interfered with people's sense, or as a gateway to belonging, I think. Zsófia will explain it better. After Zsófia, we will.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a very good starting point from you. Thank you, because when you said that I should say something about my poem, the first thought was, oh my God, what can I say? And the second thought was, maybe that's the point, where do poems come? Because this poem that you will hear in 2 languages was built up from the experience when I needed to go through this very difficult process of securing my pre-settled status after Brexit came, like after Brexit became a reality here in the UK. And as I did all the steps required, and I was very nervous because the app didn't work out and it froze and it kept throwing me out, suddenly the lines of the poem started to form in my head. And this is what you're gonna hear. The first is Hungarian. I'm kind of so I call myself a double migrant because from Hungary I moved to Austria, which are two EU countries still, and then I moved to the UK, and then Brexit happened. So I'm basically a double Central European victim of the Brexit situation. So, átmeneti rítus. Fogd a telefont, és töltsd le az appot. Tartsd az útlevél képes oldalához. Add meg a számod, és várd meg a kódot. Nyisd meg az SMS-t, írd be 6 számot. Tedd rá a telefont az útlevélre, tartsd a telefont, szkenneld be az arcod, vagy fotózd is le, a szemed is látszon. Lefagy? Újra indul? Kezdjed előről. Kis szerencsével 10-szerre meg lesz, akkor talán maradhatsz az országban. and the same in English. Rite of passage. Grab your phone and download the app. Hold it to the photo page of your passport. Enter the number and wait for the code. Open the text message, enter 6 numbers. Put the phone on the top of the passport, hold the phone high and scan your face in. Take a selfie. Hey, where are your eyes? Freezing. Restarting. Start over. With a little luck, it will work the 10th time. Then maybe you will secure your place in this strange land.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Zsófia. So we're going to hear from Cynthia and then Monica.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Rodríguez Juárez. I am a Mexican British citizen. I am currently in Mexico for health reasons and also because they're very healthy over there. And I wrote this poem about this, you know, the mummy Ramesses II, or one of them. When the French discovered it, they took it to France. They took them to France to get antifungal treatment, and even then, even a mummy, even a person who has been dead for millennia and who was like extremely powerful in their time, even a dead person from abroad needed a passport to come in, and I thought that was just ridiculous. And also it kind of made me think about all my ancestry, like just needing passport, needing visas, needing citizenships to when every single one of us contains multitudes. It's just like you cannot. It's just really reductionist and really ridiculous to just try to put us into paperwork, translate us into paperwork. So I wrote this poem. It's called "Ancestors Should Be Exempt from Needing Passports." I find you redhead, suffocating and mimetic, find you shifting, owl, snake, coyote, a creature that branches into a family of human trees, dodging bullets, leaping through the Atlantic. Ashen remains of Chichimecan rage transported, needing documents like Ozymandias need an Egyptian passport for antifungal treatment in France. Turns out that borders leak. You don't settle from one animal. You don't settle for one animal. All genealogies are yours. A shared imaginary of fire, independence from the rising, revolution from revolt, an orange sliced by rains of arrows. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you. And then we hear from Monica.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be part of this event organized by Ambrose. My name is Monica Manolachi, and I teach English and Spanish at the University of Bucharest in Romania. 10 years ago, I did a PhD on Caribbean British poetry, poetry written by Caribbean poets who live in Britain, a corpus which deals with migration a lot in the context of post-war immigration. As a translator, I have translated Caribbean poetry into Romanian and published it in several literary magazines from here. My poem for today is inspired mainly by the activity of an NGO based in the western part of Romania, in the city of Timișoara. It is called the LOGS, L-O-G-S, Group for Social Initiatives, the grassroots organization established in 2019 after several years of volunteering. And they promote integration of vulnerable migrants, fight against human trafficking, offer psychological and health counseling, and use education as a means of overcoming vulnerability. The poem I'm going to read is entitled News from Timișoara. And I wanted to express a feeling of empathy and to emphasize that refugees and asylum seekers are in the news here in Romania, and the news can be good. The merry-go-round giggles hysterically in the middle of the new Iulius town, while the fairy tale roofs of the cathedral whisper softly about some martyrs of the past. The birds flit from ramshackle mansions to stylish restaurants and heavy prison gates, walk among dandelions by the Bega River, whilst the football stadium floodlights warmly greet late yellow taxis. They are all having a change of heart. Whenever snow leopards come into town, Nasser and Ali, Hemat, Omar and Amir, moving around like your brother, determined and sly like your grandson, adventurous like your cousin, sensitive and clever like your lover, hungry and worried like your son. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we are going to hear from Munya. Munya is from Regularize. He will tell us a little bit more about Regularize and also about a report that they've just done.
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, great. Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you're all keeping nice, warm, and safe wherever you are. It's been wonderful listening to the beautiful, touching, and sometimes haunting poetry that's been read so far. And I'm looking forward to reading, to hearing more, rather. I'm very pleased to be invited to speak at this event, appropriately named Poetry and Settled Status for All. Though I won't be reading any poetry myself, I am here to speak about an important campaign that we're working on. And even though part of me wishes this was an in-person event, the pandemic continues. However, that doesn't mean that we can't get together as we are doing today to discuss human rights through art, poetry, film, and conversation. Yeah, I mean, we may be online and afar, but are nonetheless connected. So right now in the UK, as well as many countries around the world, there are populations of people who live within borders or territories, but are denied even the most basic rights, like work, access to housing, universal medical care, university education, the right to marry who they love. Can you believe this is happening in the 21st century? Access to financial support when it is needed, and the right to walk around freely without fear of being detained and forced onto an airplane back to a place they could have left many years ago, effectively being denied the right to live where they choose to seek safety and/or a better life. It has been 73 years since the adoption and proclamation by the United Nations General Assembly of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document that enshrines the rights and freedoms of all human beings living on this planet. But where do we find ourselves today? So my name is Munyaradzi and I'm from Regularize, a migrant-founded grassroots collective of migrants, British citizens and allies that seeks to improve the quality of life of the estimated 800,000 to 1.2 million undocumented migrants who are living in the UK by attaining basic rights and a safer and more equitable path to settlement and citizenship. And right now, undocumented migrants in the UK cannot access much of what I mentioned earlier. Right now, undocumented migrants in the UK, many who have lived here for more than 5 and even 10 years, some close to 20, continue to live in a system of institutionalized separateness by being denied even the most basic rights by the state through exclusionary policies and practices. Much of this goes against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and international conventions. I'm just going to touch upon one of the 30 articles, Article 23, which states, everyone has a right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. Everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for themselves and their family an existence worthy of human dignity, and supplemented if necessary by other means of social protection. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions for the protection of their interests. And how far away are we from these principles as we live in a society that criminalizes the act of work itself for migrants that may find themselves in the unfortunate and often unintentional positions of having irregularized immigration status? We have heard much about the need to be building back better in order to increase the resilience of nations and communities from world leaders, politicians, economists, academics, and activists alike, especially since the pandemic began. But this cannot be done without including and involving all people in the strategy. With many undocumented people having lived in the UK for many years, they too are integral members of British society, but are forced to live on the margins with limited rights that stop them from participating fully and living with dignity, facing an increased risk of exploitation and destitution. Now more than ever, building back better provides a tremendous opportunity to rectify specific vulnerabilities that exist in our society today. This can be done effectively through favoring and implementing supportive policies rather than exclusionary ones. In the UK, in particular, repealing parts of the legislation that facilitate the exploitation of our fellow residents and granting a safer path to settlement through an equitable regularization program is the pragmatic solution to the suffering of undocumented residents living in the UK. And it is only a matter of political will. As Ambrose mentioned in the introduction, a short mention about Ireland, just yesterday they approved a regularization scheme for many of their long-term undocumented residents and people seeking asylum who are still awaiting a response after 2 years. This will grant them a pathway to settlement and citizenship. And right now in the USA, we've been following developments there where there have been proposals to regularize their statuses and grant a pathway to citizenship to many of the 11 million undocumented migrants living there. And President Joe Biden, by the way, actually won his campaign promising to do this. And this came as a result of many years of campaigning by various groups organizing, done over a period of a decade or more. And it can be done. You can be a part of the struggle for rights and justice for migrants and people seeking asylum like everyone else. I just wanted to mention something that we published at Regularize, which you may have seen on the event page. We recently published a report entitled Building Back Better with Undocumented People, which highlights how, as we attempt to recover from the pandemic and get to grips with this whole situation and the crisis in the world, including and involving all people who are living in the UK, is the only way to true and sustainable economic and social recovery. I'll also try and post the link in the chat for you to have a look. And I just ask that you read the report, send it to your MPs, and share it with your friends, family, and colleagues, and ask them to also share and send it to their MPs. Just to finish off, I'm just going to read a quote from Frederick Douglass, who I'm not sure you're aware of. If you don't know who he is, he was a formerly enslaved person and a 19th century abolitionist who, after visiting England, set up a newspaper called the North Star on his return to the USA. So after receiving some criticism for setting up this paper, he wrote, "It is neither a reflection on the fidelity nor a disparagement of the ability of our friends and fellow laborers to assert what common sense affirms and only folly denies, that the man who has suffered the wrong is the man to demand redress, that the man struck is the man to cry out, and that he who has endured the cruel pangs of slavery is the man to advocate liberty. It is evident we must be our own representatives and advocates, not exclusively but peculiarly, not distinct from, but in connection with our white friends. In the grand struggle for liberty and equality now waging, it is meet, right, and essential that there should arise in our ranks authors and editors, as well as orators, for it is in these capacities that the most permanent good can be rendered to our cause. This was Frederick Douglass in the North Star on 3 December 1847. And on that note, I will hand over the platform so we may hear more from the gifted orators, storytellers, and poets in our presence today, some whom I indeed have firsthand experience of migration and the struggle for migrant rights, justice, and liberation. May the ancestors continue to give guidance. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Munya. Thank you. And when Munya puts the link in the chat, I would also suggest that look at the report, read it. I read it. I thought the arguments that they were making were really, really sound, and it would be good if MPs act on the recommendations. Next, we have Hubert Moore, and Hubert will be followed by me, and then we'll hear from Chad Norman. When you're ready, Hubert.
Okay, I think I might be ready. Am I coming through? Good. I'm Hubert Moore. Hello, everybody. I've got two poems that Ambrose has selected, and they're very different. The first one is called Leave to Remain, and it has really no storyline. It's a meditation about an idea. And it asks the question, how can people who come to a country as refugees leave their story behind? And do they need to? Do they want to? This was prompted by someone saying to me, I don't want to be a refugee anymore. So here is Leave to Remain. Leave to remain is everything and nothing. It's what you long for, but its small print doesn't mention what you leave behind when you remain. Home smells, the lingering of sounds. Some have to tell themselves they'll never pass their newborn child across to grandparents to hold. Every refugee has the story of a refugee behind them. How to leave your story, leave the name of refugee behind, and happen to be a person who drives taxis, a person watching swans fly overhead, a person whose first thought on waking is of a sleeping child. Now, my second poem, which I said was very different, it's one of 8 or 9 poems I've written about a farmer from Darfur Sharif, a man whom I came to love and admire very much. The relevant events in Sharif's life, which this poem refers to, are, well, his trips to market, his being attacked by the Janjaweed, his flight, not knowing where he was going or not having any English, to London, his failed application for asylum, his arrest when he applied again under a different name, his year in Rugby prison, his detention, and the destitute existence in London that followed detention. The poem is called In the Desert. Even at night, your camels knew the way across the desert to the market, where you sold your latest load of mangoes. We almost knew it too. No lights, no road, no signposts, only moon and stars and camel scents, and like an undipped headlamp, your delighted expertise. In UK, after prison, their detention, you found a place in destitution, standing only, in a telephone box in Shepherd's Bush. Even this was nothing to the eerie desert in North London, where they found a room for you, which no one else would occupy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hubert. Thank you.
Right turn on. I'm mute. Like that.
Now, the poem I'm going to read is called Martians, effing Martians. Shall we blame Martians for everything that is wrong with the world? Shall we scan every building, every meeting, living, breathing space for signs of Martians? Shall we prod earthlings, ask them to be on guard and report, round up or bash any Martian sighted or imagined? Shall we bring out spaceships and start patrolling the streets? Shall we fit PA systems to the spaceships and play messages on a loop, telling Martians to go back home, that if they do not leave voluntarily, we will come for them and forcibly remove them? Shall we round up all Martians and put them in detention centers, put them on the next spaceship to Mars? Shall we gas them? Shall we nuke them? Thank you very much. And next we hear from Chad Norman. You're on mute, Chad.
There we go. Sorry, I'm used to being muted. anyways, I just wanted to thank you, Ambrose, so much for your energy and passion and vision in regard to this latest anthology. And I was part of a launch of another anthology, more local here in Nova Scotia this morning, and made me think a lot about the importance of anthologies. And I think the biggest thing is that the capture and preservation of history that all of us are part of in this anthology, and that means a lot to me to have my poem be able to move along in the world as well in between the covers. So also, I just wanted to mention that the poem that I'm going to share comes out of something that's quite universal and sometimes probably taken for granted, but I think that it's one of the most powerful acts in so many different countries and with so many different people and cultures. The poem's entitled "The Lighting of a Candle." It stands before me, still unlit, unlike the spreading problem, lit over and over because of hatred. Or am I wrong? Am I afraid? Hatred is no fool. Hatred is. And I am not wrong or afraid when it comes to what my pen wants. I don't give a damn about keyboards or computers or cell phones or that unbelievable mouth called social media. I give a damn about my country, one known as Canada, one worth giving more than a damn about, one, the only one I have to give myself to. The lighting of a candle, now bright, now lit long ago. Well, maybe not so long ago, if I put aside any belief in time, how it seems to be mad to pass, to leave us another confusion as to why it passes by day after day in such an unexplainable hurry. Please understand our world is not small, meaning there is room, so much room, for one family, all the families who need to escape what they call danger, what we would call a report on the nightly news, what I need to call an invitation. Please come to my country. You know it is known as Canada. So many have come before you, families, children, man and woman, who stand somewhere with one match, with one ancient and simple faith, the lighting of a candle can be a beginning, can be like when a child is newly born and the world becomes borderless. The world is found in each and every flicker. Thank you very much for letting me share my poem.
Thank you very much, Chad. Thank you very much. And then we are going to hear from Catherine Okoronkwo, followed by David Owen, followed by Michele Witthaus.
Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you all. I'm actually normally based in Swindon in the UK, but I'm actually calling in this evening from Ghana. That's West Africa, for those who are interested in knowing. I was particularly interested in Barrington's poem because he spoke of running, and I was reminded of the fact that my parents were running when they moved out of Nigeria, West Africa again, to try and seek a better life for themselves and for their children, and particularly running away from the impact and the legacy of colonialism in Nigeria, and also the impact and the legacy of Biafra. So I think that theme of running is so pertinent in today's discussion. So I grew up as a third culture kid. I call myself a global citizen, but I'm normally residing in the UK. I still hold a Nigerian passport, and I definitely have experienced a lot of the issues around trying to find a place of safety, or a place where one can say, this is home, even if it's home for a season or for a time. The poem I'm going to read for you is titled Aliens, and I'll just say a bit about this poem. I studied my first degree in the States, in America, in Virginia. And every time we went to America through the airports, one of the things that really got to me was this whole idea of having aliens written in the immigration for people who weren't non-US citizens. And I was just fascinated by that, wondering why on earth they would, other others by calling them aliens. So hence, this is my poem. Aliens live in cafes, watching dressed up people, drinking mockers, beneath shop windows displaying anorexic mannequins, on circular bus traveling from Perry Bar to Acox Green, at Heartlands Hospital, waiting for blood to be taken and meds given. In dreams where Indi Nana reveal glimpses of a world beyond, days wrapped in church sailcoats, 2 sizes too big, bunioned toes in ill-fitting shoes, kicking up damp autumn leaves, scavenging commercial bins for half-eaten or out-of-date food. Hidden behind a shed, unable to sleep, a fox chases a squirrel. In the darkness, tears stream at lost years, exhausted dreams, handcuffed by home office robots. I once read in a Chinese fortune cookie, aliens live in a small village on the edge of the Arctic Circle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And next we have David Owen.
Hello, lovely to be with you all this evening. My kind of background in relationship to this topic is that my day job is as a philosopher, and I work primarily on issues of the ethics of migration and refuge. So I spent probably the last 20 years of my life making philosophical arguments for the kinds of positions that regularized campaign for. And I guess my most recent book was What Do We Owe to Refugees, which argues for, if you like, a rather more ethical approach to the refugee policy. But anyway, I'm here under a different hat tonight, not as a philosopher, but as a poet. And the poem I'm going to read you really emerged out of thinking about the way in which the sort of bureaucratic language of the Home Office does kind of violence to experience, basically. And I wanted to take some of the words that were used and are used by the Home Office, and if in a sense return them to their everyday use. I also wanted in sort of background to kind of draw attention to some issues like not having a right to work and things like that. But the primary move was really one about trying to kind of return words to their everyday sense. So here's the poem. The title is Pieta. The child is settled in his father's arms, held rock steady, even as parental eyes jitter nervously over inked-in papers, seeking leave to remain. Such an odd phrase, he thinks, as if you must go away to come back and stay. The child stirs a little, shifts, wriggles, until his dad's voice settles him once more. The flat is clean, but damp leaks through the walls, and there are signs of daily battle against defects: brushes, bucket, cloth rags. Pride confronts fate, to be endured. He'd been an engineer before the soldiers came. He'd designed offices, sun-touched towers that became bomb sculptures, steel girders twisting out of concrete as cries of abstracted anguish. The child is waking. He banishes memory and smiles down at his son. Their status is settled. They are all each has left that remains. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. And then I think it's Michele next.
Yes, thanks, Ambrose. It's just such a privilege to be here tonight and to hear so many of these amazing poems coming from so many different places, really powerful. My experience of this subject is colored by coming from multiple diasporas over many generations, coming down from Ireland, from Germany, from Scotland, stopping in Canada, South Africa. And I really relate to where and aliens, and one feels not at home anywhere. Where is home? And also what Barrington was talking about concerning feeling that you're running and you can't stop, but you're desperate to stop. These two poems that I'd like to read both touch on different aspects of this, and they both are rooted in my own experience of just continually moving. The first one is called What Was Left Behind. The last time I saw my father, he was helping me leave in haste. Carrying my bag downstairs, he stopped on the landing to catch his breath, and I saw how old I had made him. His brow was laced with lines that looked to me like anger, and I wished I had not shared the burden of my lawyer's question, how soon can you go? And the second poem I'd like to read is more of it was just several people tonight have talked about the experience of trying to interact with the bureaucracy and how we always get it wrong because we can't win against the machines, actually. This is called Home Affairs. Liverpool sent me to Croydon, but Croydon would not let me in. Did not care to know why I'd come. Different department, they said. I sent myself back to Watford in a bid to work out what was wrong. Spread out the patchwork of papers I put all my details on. Liverpool gave me a deadline so close I could not help but default. Croydon advised I ignore it. Different department, they said. Liverpool wrote me a letter, warning I might have to go back to a place they referred to as home, but not saying where that might be. I'd just about given up when one day a different department again confirmed without warning in triplicate, indefinite leave to remain.
Thank you very much, Michele. And then we hear from Gregory.
Thank you, Ambrose. For this project, I'm interested in thinking about lesbians and gay men who are fleeing persecution, including the threat of death, and trying to move into more accepting environments elsewhere, and how they establish what they claim, how they establish who they claim to be in order to get refuge. I'm interested in the broader context of homophobia in the developing world and the extent to which this is a colonial inheritance. I'm interested in the difference between legal restrictions on lesbians and gay men in particular, in the ex-colonies of Britain, and on the other hand, nations subject to the more liberal Napoleonic code. Those would be France, Germany, Spain. I'm interested in differing levels of homophobia in English-speaking or French-speaking ex-colonies in the Caribbean, for instance, and also the difference between the ex-colonies of Protestant empires and Roman Catholic empires. I'm interested in the possibility that some of the great African liberators, like Robert Mugabe, for instance, learned their hostile attitudes to homosexuality from sexual assaults they witnessed in jail when imprisoned by the British. I first raised this point, I think, in the chapter on African poetry in my history of gay literature. I'm interested in why some post-independence societies want to hold on to the colonial heritage of homophobic laws and attitudes, unlike, say, immediately post-apartheid South Africa. But to go back to what I said at the beginning, in this poem, I'm interested in one gay man who, fleeing persecution in Uganda, has to prove to the Home Office in London that he's gay. He has to prove it to officials who only have an Anglo-American model of what gay identity is. The poem's in two halves, the first half in Uganda and the second half in the UK. Its title comes from the Bible, but also James Baldwin used it as the title of one of his great essays. The evidence of things not seen. 1. Kampala. Discretion was his only scant asylum from hostility. For fear of being beaten, he concealed the truth about himself, defensively unclubbable. Policing gesture, gait, and tone of voice, he made a habit of performance, always speaking lines he'd learnt by rote, if not by heart, avoiding being judged as what society would not condone. The evident is not the self. 2. London. But now, the apparatchiks of identity require him to be more identifiable. A fluent wrist, a swish, a lisp, a love of Broadway musicals, whatever, short of bodily corroboration on the desk, might constitute defining proof. Their unresponsive faculties, insensitive to nuance, fail to register a simple truth. The self is not self-evident. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gregory. And then now we come to the part that a lot of people have been waiting for, the conversation, question and answer session. Who wants to start? If you unmute yourself and just speak, that would be fine.
If I might throw in a contribution, Ambrose?
Yes, certainly, Barrington.
Number one, first and foremost, once again, thanks for this fantastic opportunity and for being able to feast, and I say that with my fellow poets. It almost feels like I've had so much to eat that I still wanted to continue, but there was so much on the table to try and take in. I've always been interested in language, even as a child. And in terms of my interest in language, what's been presented here tonight has been some very, very powerful language about how people are perceived and so on. And forgive me that I can't remember because there are so many pieces that have been read tonight. But somebody earlier on, or a little while ago, was saying about kind of reframing language. And that's something that I'm very interested in, because to give you a very key example, I do not like the term people of color. And it's funny because recently, it may not be visible on camera, but when I say I've literally shed blood for my writing, I bumped my head on my bookcase. And I thought about the term, which is the usual term, the plaster is flesh colored. And I thought to myself, well, okay, the innuendo is that, okay, if that color of the plaster is equal to flesh color, what if your flesh is not of that color? So likewise, the term people of color, why that kind of separation in terms of language? Does that mean that, okay, in inverted commas, does that mean that white is not a color? I remember growing up with that term, colored people. And the image that came to mind as I got more mature was a beach ball, because a beach ball is colored. Does that then make me a beach ball? Now that might sound silly, but the point that I'm trying to allude to is, yeah, it's almost the way that language seems to have been weaponized. And dare I say, based on the piece that has just been read by Greg, in terms of people like James Baldwin, Monia earlier on spoke about Frederick Douglass. At times I think of ourselves in terms of the human race. How far have we really traveled? On the face of it, it seems like there's been some fantastic advancements in terms of medicine, education, social care, and all the other large elements that have been discussed tonight. That ironically, if we're to use that term, people of color, they've been largely excluded from or regarded with suspicion. So as I said, I'm very interested in language, and I hope that the piece that I delivered earlier on, or shared earlier on, helped to garner our sense of questioning things and seeing things from somebody else's or from another perspective. And hopefully the wider public will eventually, hopefully once again, purchase the forthcoming anthology. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barrington. Is there anyone else who wants to add or say anything or comment on?
If I could just, oh, sorry. You go first, Michelle.
Well, just in immediate response to thinking of Barrington talking about the people of colour, I remember growing up in South Africa, seeing benches and places in public where they would write slechts nie blankes, which literally translated means only not whites. And so they referred to black people as just by what they were not whites. That was the official term in Afrikaans, you know. So, and that is shocking, utterly shocking, really, when you think that everything was defined in those terms. There wasn't even a name for these people who were shunted out of public life and into corners, you know. Yeah, that was just something that came up when you were speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to pick up Barrington's point because a lot of the time language is presented, you know, through institutions as if it were simply a neutral instrument, a tool that can be used for doing some things, not others, which is of course a completely misleading conception of language, because language is most fundamentally a mode of expression. And a way in which we express our relations to one another. So when you kind of look at, you know, states and all the multiplicity of migrant statuses that they label with different terms. So refugee, okay? For many migrants, refugee is a really privileged status, basically, compared to many other migrant statuses. So how you get labeled by the state can have very significant effects on, you know, what rights are available to you, your deportability, and, you know, kind of your ability to, as it were, participate in society. So that's all kind of presented to us as if, you know, somehow people were naturally fitted into these boxes. But these boxes are basically constructions of state power. They are the state choosing to categorize people in particular ways and divide them up for particular purposes. So I think one of the things that poetry does is it contests that kind of general, let's assign people to a class, because it always, as it were, speaks to the individuality, both of the voice giving expression to it, but also of the subject matter. Poetry is, you know, in this sense, an endless struggle to try and find language that's adequate to expressing our experience. It's a never-ending struggle. But in that sense, sort of language and bureaucratic, as it were, mortal enemies.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Is there anyone else who, Joachim and Laura? I see your hand is up. You've got a hand up.
Yeah, let me add to David's thoughts about language, and that has to do with pronunciation. You probably are not aware of it, David, but Ambrose, of course, is, and everybody else who speaks English with an accent is. It doesn't often matter what we say. I open my mouth and I'm immediately classified. And it is important for poetry, in my perspective, to be read aloud and live, so that on top of language, we get the accent, we get the pronunciation, we get all the little mistakes people like I are making on a daily basis. And an additional aspect to this I have to share with the others who have been hit by the Brexit transition. I was perfectly okay in my local pub until this ominous day in 2016. And from that point onwards, my very asking for a beer for a pint with my accent, suddenly eyebrows would be raised, and I from that moment onward, I would not go back there, and I would not order another beer, because it's not just what we say, but how we say it, and all the attachments people put to pronunciation and to accents, which can poison an atmosphere. For me, however, it's grounds for joy. When I find somebody with an accent, I won't immediately run up to them and say, well, congratulations, I got one too. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joachim. Thank you. And also the whole concept around refugees, who is a refugee, who isn't. I think it's also important to say that that is contested. Earlier, David, you said that refugee is almost a privileged status. It could be that there was a time when it was. I think now it's slightly more a bit precarious, because you have to renew that that status, and also there are questions around you know, when do you stop being a refugee? Will you always be a refugee? And again, thinking of language around migration and immigrants, I hear in some circles people speak of first generation, second generation immigrants. Personally, that is something that I dispute. I would suggest that it's either you are an immigrant or you're not. It's either you're a migrant or you're not. Some of the people who are being referred to as second generation migrants are actually citizens. Doesn't that mean if we use that, if we accept that, doesn't that mean there will always be some people who will not belong? So I don't know. Anyone else wants to, dying to say something? Ayan, yes.
Yeah, about when you said that, sometimes I'm going to ask myself that till when I will be a refugee. And most of the places during the time that I was in Greece and suffering because of the shelter, I was always asking myself why people are most calling me a refugee girl and not my real name. When I'm seeing every day, my life is only covered with waiting. Sometimes I really forget that I will have a future, and I will have a place to live inside, and do not think of a shelter. Most of the time, I only suffer that tomorrow where I will sleep. Because for me, life during this 5 years after Afghanistan, it was completely like a question mark. It was never for me clear that, okay, I will be in this country, I will stay here, I will study, and I will make my future. But for me, it's not like this. I always have to suffer and think of the solution, but sometimes the solution is not coming to me. Maybe I'm not going to the right way, or maybe the solutions are not going to find me. But I hope this uncertainty will be finished soon, and to live in one country and do not to suffer a lot, and just to be myself and not to be forced that people should call me a refugee girl.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Munya, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I suppose I just wanted to touch on some of the points that have been said, including what David was saying earlier, looking at the sort of false binary between refugee and migrant that exists in I guess to add that there is also a false binary that exists in popular discourse in the UK in particular. I think the categories are also used to sort of differentiate, try and put people into boxes where one box is seen as deserving and one box is seen as undeserving, which is something that we touch upon in the report, the Building Back Better report, and how migration is understood in Britain. So I think, yeah, I mean, it goes beyond just like state-imposed labels, because it really seeps into public discourse where people, I mean, in the last couple of weeks, there have been a lot of discussions on social media where, you know, a lot of people have been arguing to say, don't call the people that are on the boats migrants, call them asylum seekers, call them refugees. And I mean, from my perspective and the perspective of many people, it has been quite shocking to see some of the arguments that have been given, considering I think the United Nations many years ago agreed to describe people as migrants and refugees, or migrants and people seeking asylum, the people coming on the boats, just because some people may not be, I guess, may not end up from the perspective of the state with that refugee status. So I think we need to really challenge the sort of hierarchies that have been talked about here, where one group is seen as being more deserving than the other, no matter, you know, what someone's reasons to migrate and whether they travel irregularly or not. I think we really need to look at why they moved and sort of what was the driver for them to move, and what part of their needs need to be met by them migrating. That's all. Yeah.
I think it's fitting that we hear from David and then move to Barrington.
Was that me?
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I was just going to agree. And the other thing that came up in several contributions tonight, which is actually really important in this from a historical perspective, is the relationship to empire. And, you know, how many, if you look at those states which, you know, sadly are the states of largest refugee flows, you will see that these were all states that were colonized, basically, and we're still living with very much with the after effects of both formal imperialism and continuing forms of informal imperialism. And so, I mean, my own view here is that states that were imperial states like Britain have, as it were, additional obligations to people seeking to migrate from former colonies, as it were. And in many ways, we should go back to the old system before the Commonwealth Act in 1963, whereby basically everybody who had been a British subject had a right to move into the UK. And there was free movement at that time. You know, and I think that's a kind of obligation we have for the kind of historical harm and damage that we have done, and in many ways continue to do. And
I think seeing as it's already 7:30, we'll hear from Barrington, and then we bring the event to a close.
Thank you for that. I hope I can express this in the way that it is in my mind. We all know as poets how we can have something in our mind, but when we're trying to give birth to it through words, which sometimes feel so inadequate, you know, it comes out differently. First and foremost, before I say what I'm going to say, my heart goes out to anybody who has either lost somebody as a result of COVID, is suffering from long COVID, or whose life has been impacted by COVID. And I know even saying that is limited, you know. We as a family have suffered a loss as well. I think in a strange way, COVID has made us all refugees. And I think if people just take a moment, I'm not saying about the poets who are here tonight, but if the world, primarily the so-called rich countries or the wealthier countries, will just take a moment to pause to think, how did COVID impact on our lives? Because for me, when I think about refugees, migrants, whatever terminology is supposed to encapsulate these people, they, them, whatever the language, COVID has limited us in so many different ways. And those ways that it's limited us has been happening for decades and centuries in terms of people who have been labeled as refugees. And I so desperately want us to move from so many of the labels. And ultimately, I think when we will reach our pinnacle as a race is when we just simply see each other as human, because I find every time something is labeled, it kind of limits it and makes so many assumptions and blots out individualism and just herds everybody together almost like cattle. And even in what I've just said, I'm guilty, because I'm sure if I was able to talk to two cows, no two cows would feel the same. No two cows move the same if I could understand, you know? So silly as that analogy might seem, for those who probably do farming and so on, they can tell you about the personalities of those individual cows. And so do we as humans have individual personalities. And we just need to move away. It's like all these labels are just burdens, are just yokes, you know, instead of letting us address our humanity, it strips, it seems to just, it's like we just keep being stripped away. And for me, COVID is like this alarm bell that is saying, people, you know, what's happening with the environment as well, all of this tied together. To use a phrase, it's almost like when I look around the world and see what's happening, it's like before us, we're seeing the perfect storm, you know, but then what are we going to do about it, you know? And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Barrington. So I think it's now for me to say thank you to everyone who's contributed, who's read, and also for the comments that you made. And also thank you to people who attended the event. The event was called Poetry and Settled Status for All. The idea behind the event is that we need to open up alternative spaces for conversations on these issues. And one of the ways we can do that is through our words, through poetry, through conversations like the ones that we've just had. There are issues that we need to explore. There are issues that governments also need to pay attention to. One of those things that governments need to attend to is that actually there is no reason why governments should keep significant numbers of people in a state of precarity, with precarious immigration status. Governments can, if they want to, give leave to remain or settled status to everyone who lives within those territories. Immediate example that we've seen has been the experience of EU nationals who got pre-settlement status and then settled status. The state can also do the same with everyone who is here. There is absolutely no justification for keeping significant numbers of people in the kinds of precarious states that they are in. And these are experiences that are taking place not only in Britain and the United Kingdom, but also on mainland Europe, in Italy, in Greece, and other countries. The anthology is coming out shortly, maybe within the next 4 weeks. Realistically, I think it will come out sometime in the new year, January. And when it does, I hope we will, all of us who are here, we will also facilitate similar conversations with different selections and combinations of readers. And we see how the conversation develops. So as a final word, please look up Regularize, look for their report and read it, and also act on it and ask your representatives to do the same. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and see you at the next event. Thank you.